Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. He's Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network. And now, live from Austin, Texas, Alex Jones.
Before I forget, I'm going to say out of the gates, we're scheduled in the last 30 minutes of the broadcast tomorrow to have Senator-elect Rand Paul on. We got Ventura with big news on multi-fronts joining us next week. Jesse Ventura. Today is going to be a jam-packed transmission as well. It is the 9th day of December 2010 on this Thursday edition. We have John Young of Cryptome, really the proto or archetype of WikiLeaks, and also involved at multi-levels in what you could call the founding of the WikiLeaks type system. He has a lot of inside intel on it, so he'll be joining us coming up in about 45 minutes from now. We've got Donald Light coming on the broadcast, who is a visiting professor at Stanford University and professor of comparative health care at the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. And he has written a book breaking down one of the biggest killers, if not the biggest, it's right up there with automobile accidents, are prescription drugs. So they've got big sis with telescreens going up saying, watch for terrorists everywhere and don't trust your neighbor, when more people die each year from bee stings than terrorism in this country. The border's wide open, 28,000 deaths. You know about that. And meanwhile, we've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of deaths from these deadly prescription drugs. It's well known, but he's done the breakdowns and cross-referenced all the big studies. So Donald Light coming on about that, one of the most dangerous things in our society. Now, it's not as scary looking as a man wearing a turban. I'll give you that. And it's not as much fun to run around and be afraid at night and hide under your bed from prescription drugs, but it is arguably the #1 cause of unnatural death in this nation. And that's the government's own admissions, that, oh, it's killing 300+ thou a year. It's probably a lot more than that. Flesh-eating bacteria infections out of hospitals and clinics are killing a couple hundred thou a year. And don't worry, they'll just keep giving antibiotics to people who don't need them. I mean, you better only take antibiotics if you can't whip it. I've had strep throat and things before for 2 weeks, and I won't take it until I beat it. Not because I don't know antibiotics are great. It's because I don't want to lower my immunity and then also contribute to growing more and more deadly bacteria. One time I did break down, though, and take antibiotics when a security guard jumped out of nowhere at the Supreme Court building. I'd walked up on a Sunday when Bilderberg had ended, and we were there shooting some video of different government buildings for cutaway shots and films. In fact, you see the shots in Fall of the Republican Obama Deception. And a cop jumps out and says, what are you doing? So I kind of and turned towards him, and the feet on the pillars are about 2 feet tall. And I turned and just gashed my shin through the jeans, cut my shin. And I didn't really, I kind of ignored it at the time. There was a little bit of bleeding. And so I make the joke that the Supreme Court building bit me, because a month later I had pus just pouring out of my leg, and they did x-rays, and it found out it was rotting, I guess kind of a gangrenous type bacteria under the skin all around the bone. And so thank God for those antibiotics, or it'd have been saw my left leg off. So I'm not saying antibiotics aren't magical. And very important is that they're being overused. So now we got flesh-eating bacteria running wild everywhere, different forms of it. All right, I've already just gotten distracted off here at the start of the broadcast. I'm very good at that. So we have John Young, Donald Light, and Lord Monckton joining us from Cancun. Boy, big news there. Ted Turner and the UN saying global one-child policy, 95% population reductions. We've got to shut down the industrial society, on and on and on. Just total brazen criminality, masquerading as saviors of the world. He'll be joining us from Cancun, there on the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, in the war-torn region. And we'll get into a lot more coming up on WikiLeaks, the economy, you name it, straight ahead. Key intel. Stay with us.
Crisis Communications Radio Network proudly presents The Alex Jones Show, because there's a war on for your mind.
It is Thursday, 9th day of December, 2010. I'm going to be live here for the next 3 hours. Lord Christopher Monckton joins us from the Criminal Summit, where the globalists are camouflaging their world government feudal takeover, their world government establishment of feudalism is what they're attempting. He'll be joining us from Cancun coming up in the last hour. Donald Light, again, a researcher and author dealing with how the prescription drugs are causing so many hundreds of thousands of deaths each year here in the United States alone. And John Young of Cryptome is going to be joining us as well coming up here in about 35 minutes from now. Let me just dive straight into the news and information. We will have Rand Paul, Senator-elect, last 30 minutes of the broadcast tomorrow. I want to just throw that tidbit out there. We have some other big surprise guests with key intel coming up on the transmission next week, of course, and I'll also be live this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. The London Telegraph has reported on 2010's top searches, and it's the Google Zeitgeist top searches of 2010. And we've actually been listed in these before we started having Google bombs and having listeners do that. We've had films like Endgame, Obama Deception, The Name Alex Jones, Infowars.com, showing up as top search trends. And you can actually see that on the Google Trends. You'll notice Alex Jones is always being searched and is always in the top 100 searches or so. And again, that's not, oh, look, people are searching my name. Aren't I important? It's an indicator of the fact that we're having such a big effect. But over the year, Alex Jones was the 10th most popular search result in the news and current events section of Google Analytics. So throughout the year, Alex Jones was number 10. Other results were election 2010, rail strike, Democrat, things like that. So very, very interesting to show the effect that we're having overall there. That from the London Telegraph today with the headline, Google Zeitgeist top searches for 2010. Okay, let's get into the financial news right now. This is really scary. You notice interest rates are actually going up now on mortgages, even though the official lending rate is basically zero for the big mega banks. They get the Federal Reserve largesse backed up by taxpayer money at basically 0%. And then we have to go out and get loans from them. And you've seen credit cards go up now, in many cases above 30%, whereas there was low lending on mortgages in the attempt to get the economy going. Those have now spiked up in the last month. Why is all this happening? Because the decision has been made to devalue the dollar, to accelerate the devaluation. The Chinese, 2 weeks ago, announced, of course, with the Russians, they will no longer engage in inter trade between the two nations, back and forth. The two nations that border each other on several areas, very strong trading partners. They will no longer use the dollar as the world reserve currency in their business exchanges. So that has further damaged the dollar. And there's been a lot of other things happening. The Arabs are moving away from using the dollar. The euro is moving away from using the dollar. Latin America is accelerating their move away from it. Africa is accelerating their move away from it, because it's being devalued in their hands. And short term, as Dr. Paul Craig Roberts and other economists have explained here, as the dollar plunges, countries go in and try to buy it to prop it up because they've already been held hostage by having such giant holdings in it. But now they're realizing, well, it doesn't matter if we try to prop it up short term. Over the long-term aggregate, or even on a yearly graph, which is midterm, the dollar is being devalued and the writing is on the wall. So that is a big deal. And all other major currencies are going to follow this as well until all currencies are debased. And then they will, of course, then force everyone onto the SDR that's already in full operation, which is a completely digital cashless system run by the IMF and World Bank, and to give the, quote, currency, digital currency, some backup and some supposed value. It will be under the credit and faith of the planet, and the carbon taxes, the VAT taxes, the Tobin taxes, the travel taxes, all paid directly to the bankers that have engineered this collapse. And now we're seeing more evidence of that. CNBC, bond prices plunge for second day on deficit fears. U.S. Treasuries plunged yesterday, Wednesday, extending Tuesday's sharp losses and pushing benchmark yields to a 6-month high after a deal in Washington to extend tax cuts fueled fears of inflation and swelling budget deficit. So it continues from there. See, if they don't suppress the economy and have a depression on Main Street, all of these tens of trillions of dollars pumped into the global markets will cause inflation. So that's why the banks don't loan this money out to the general public. They're freezing it. The money is only for them to use to consolidate and buy up infrastructure. But if they do cut taxes, that will let the economy grow a bit more, and then more of that money will flow to the people, and so that will accelerate inflation. But in my view, they're already inflating the currency. They're already devaluing it, and it's better to at least have some of our money in the short term before it's completely devalued than have our money devalued in the long term and have the economy continue to stall into a total depression. But side issue. Continuing, U.S. Treasuries hit by biggest sell-off in 2 years. People are not buying them. When the Treasury offers them on the open market, people aren't buying them. So you're having record monetization of the private Federal Reserve that takes our tax money. We have to back this up, and then buys U.S. debt. And then, of course, they get the interest on it out of nothing. And China is the biggest owner of treasuries, but right behind them is the private Federal Reserve. And if this continues, by the middle of next year, CNBC has even reported that the Federal Reserve, the private cartel, will be the biggest owner of our debt. So the private banker is completely owning us. U.S. Treasury suffered their biggest two-day sell-off since the collapse of Lehman Brothers, following a torrid month that has seen borrowing costs for Western governments soar. See, Germany, Portugal, Greece, Ireland, the nation's cost to borrow money from the private central banks that we, the people, back up and fund with taxes, that cost is going up. And it's been even reported by the Irish newspapers that this debt is not owed by the Irish people. It's the bank's derivatives debt. But they're saying, sorry, Ireland will now be totally owned by offshore banks, and we're raising your taxes and cutting your benefits. I mean, it's just pure robbery. And people say, oh, the Irish, the Greeks, it's their fault. We're all in the same boat together. We're all being sucked dry. It's just happening in a domino effect where the globalists suck one country dry and then move on to the next. That's always been the model that they've used over and over again. So, continuing here, Germany, Japan, and the U.S. have all seen their benchmark market interest rates rise by more than a quarter in the past month, while the UK has risen by nearly a fifth. You could argue that we are at the next stage where the global cost of capital goes higher and higher. See, the bankers have hoarded the thousands of trillions, and they've got all these toxic assets. They hold everybody hostage. The governments raise taxes, pump money into the banks, and then the banks say, okay, now I'm going to raise the price for you.